Ireland Indigenous, and welcome to today's episode of Social Studies Explorer. Today's episode, Settling the Southern Colonies. Earth by referencing where we are here in northern Michigan or central Michigan. You see Jamestown. And Jamestown, as you remember, was part of the Southern Colonies. As we kind of zoom in, the Southern Colonies are going to begin right here on this line. Let's get my annotation tool so I can show it to you. What a different color than that. Let's go yellow. This here is going to be considered the South. You can see the capital of Washington, D.C., which at this time didn't exist. There's in Maryland right here, Virginia. As we go south, at that time West Virginia didn't exist. It was part of Virginia. Go through here, the Carolinas. You can see there's a lot of rivers and obviously coastal area. It's on the Atlantic Ocean. See the Croatoan National Forest. They play a role in our story today. And you see there's quite a few cities found right on the coast. You may have heard of Myrtle Beach. Coming down, another Mount Pleasant, Charleston. Charleston is going to play a big role in the story of our country's history, both in the colonial and during the Civil War era. You see it's by water. Go out and head down again. Georgia. And that's really where it's going to stop right around this area that makes up where Florida is. Florida at that time was a member of the Spanish Empire. So we're looking really this area. These are going to be our southern colonies. The climate of this area was much warmer than you might find here in Michigan. Although the deep harbors here in South Carolina are going to be advantageous to trade and allowing things to be sent over to Europe compared to North Carolina that didn't have quite the same amount of natural harbors. In fact, Charleston here is going to be a major harbor in our nation's history. So let's clear the drawings and let's look at what we're really trying to make sure we know via this video. And these are some of the parts of the standard that we should make sure we understand. The patterns of settlement and control, including impact of geography on settlement, the establishment of Jamestown, which you also have in an upcoming lesson, the development of one crop economies, such as rice, tobacco, and later cotton, interactions with our indigenous people, including trades of goods, services, and ideas among European and indigenous peoples, the development of colonial representative assemblies, and the development of slavery. So let's talk a little bit first with obviously the Appalachian Mountains being off to our west here. That's going to keep people kind of close to the coast. And we remember from our first time talking about Jamestown that tobacco is going to be bigger up here. They're not using it necessarily as a sacred medicine like we do, but they are using it for pleasure purposes. And it makes a lot of money. And we're going to find that when there's money, more people come there. And eventually we get to the point where there's enough people using enough land that others are going to start moving to the south. And that's where we get the Carolinas, which were at one point one colony. As it turns out, right along the coast is really good for growing things like rice and indigo. North Carolina was more known for trees. Let's draw ourselves a tree. Looks like a little Christmas tree. Here we're looking at rice. Let's use the text tool. You guys don't want to see my handwriting. Rice, indigo. Put up here lumbering. And those are going to be important in building the economies. Obviously, if you can cut down a lot of trees, cities need trees to build. This is an era when lumber structures were the norm. Some were brick, but mostly built out of lumbering. Rice, and we're not talking necessarily like the Monoman of our region. This rice was grown a little differently, but it was obviously a major crop. All right, so let's bounce over into the reading portions of today's lesson. And obviously, the development of the southern colonies, we kind of started talking about the influence of geography. You grow what you can where you can. There's a reason that we don't grow pineapples and bananas all over the place in Michigan. We don't have the right weather. And obviously, geography plays a role in that. We are further to the north. Areas where you have the right temperature, the right type of soil, the right type of land, whether it be plains or whether it be mountains or even forests, that's going to play a role. The reasons for founding the southern colonies, part of it, if you're in Maryland, it has to do with religious freedom. Catholics weren't treated real well in England because they weren't part of the Church of England. So they come here. Oglethorpe set up a colony in Georgia for debtors, although that doesn't really become the main impetus of their migration here. It was the original thought. Other people are just looking to make money. And we've mentioned some of the economic activities: raising tobacco, rice, indigo is a huge thing there. It's going to bring in a number of people from Africa to work on these giant plantations or growing plantations. And that's something that's going to play a role really until 1865 at the conclusion of our Civil War. So from 1619, when the first slaves are brought to Jamestown, goes all the way to 1865. It's a very, very long time. Some of the pull factors, and those are the things that make people want to move to a place, are those the availability of jobs, more space, money to be made off of tobacco, rice, and indigo. Push factors, if you're in England, if you've ever compared the size of the British Isles to North America, we're significantly larger. It had grown crowded and it was dirty. And for a lot of people, the opportunity for self-advancement wasn't there. So coming over here to North America would seem like a good chance to start again. You will find in the Google Classroom a Google form of this, although you will have a paper copy as well. And this is how you will be assessed. What were the reasons for founding? The influence of geography, what kind of economic activities, the push factors, or the reasons people left other places to come here, and the pull factors, why do people come here? And you may have just heard a few of them as well. and there's always opportunities for additional research. So let's go down and let's do some of the reading. And if we know anything about this particular documentation, is quite often some of the answers are found in the readings. So if you need the readings, I strongly recommend you use them when answering the questions. But also make sure you memorize it, because I might quiz you on it later. All right, so let's look at the Carolina colony. And Carolina colony is the one right in where it says North and South Carolina. At that time, it was one colony. King Charles granted land for a colony between Virginia and Spanish Florida in 1663. He divided the colony between 8 wealthy Englishmen who became the proprietors of the colony. Proprietors is another word for owner. The proprietors wrote a constitution for the colony that allowed colonists to make some laws, but most of the power was kept in the hands of the king. There were already English people in the area. They had come from Virginia and had been building settlements in the northern part of the region. The colony was very large and 2 different regions began to develop, one in the northern part and one in the southern part. North Carolina. Many of the settlers in the north of the colony were former indentured servants who had moved there from Virginia. They began small tobacco farms in the region. Later, lumbering became an important economic activity as settlers made use of the pine forests of the area. They made tar and pitch from the local pines. These were important products needed in England. The area in the north continued to develop as mainly an area of small farms. As a result, there were not many enslaved Africans in the region for many years. One of the problems people faced was a lack of a good deep water harbor. This made it difficult to ship tobacco, pitch, and tar. It also made it difficult to get new settlers to the area. South Carolina. Many of the first settlers in the southern part of Carolina were planters from the island of Barbados. They had owned large plantations on the island and now hoped to do the same thing in Carolina. Many brought enslaved Africans with them. The geography of the southern part of the colony was perfect for rice and indigo, a plant used to make a special blue dye. Large plantations developed which grew these 2 cash crops, and increasing numbers of enslaved Africans were brought to the region to work on the plantations. A town with a good harbor named Charleston was founded in 1680. Quickly grew and became an important trade center. 2 colonies from 1. As the population of the colony grew, the colony became difficult to govern. This was due partly to its large size. It was also due, however, to the differences in the northern and southern parts of the colony. In 1712, the northern 2/3 of the colony was divided into 2 colonies, North Carolina and South Carolina. Here's a brief description of the province of Carolina on the coast of Florida. And please note that there are spelling differences. Things are spelled differently in 2020 than they were in, 1650. So I'm going to start this over there. A brief description of the province of Carolina on the coast of Florida, and more particularly of a new plantation begun by the English at Cape Fear on that river, now by them called Charles River, the 29th of May, 1664, wherein is set forth the healthfulness of the air, the fertility of the earth and waters, and the great pleasure and profit will accrue to those who shall go thither and enjoy the same. So what we're finding out is they think that there's fresh air, which isn't always true in London, good earth, good water, and it's a good opportunity to make some money. Let's now also look at primary source for our transcription. There was originally a picture of this, and you would have had 0 chance of being able to read it well. It was kind of smudgy, written in 1600s handwriting. So we got you this. George II, by the grace of God, of Great Britain, France, and Ireland, King, Defender of the Faith, and so forth, to all to whom these presents shall come, greeting. Whereas we are credibly informed that many of our poor subjects are, through misfortunes and want of employment, reduced to great necessity, insomuch as by their labor they are not able to provide a maintenance for themselves and families, and if they had means to defray their charges of passage and other expenses incident to new settlements, they would be glad to settle in any of our provinces in America, whereby cultivating the lands, at present waste and desolate, they might not only gain a comfortable subsistence for themselves and families, but also strengthen our colonies and increase the trade, navigation, and wealth of these realms. This really here is a discussion of the need for indentured servants, people that would come over here, work, and eventually get their own land where they could provide for their families. We're not really going to agree with them that the area was desolate. We know there were already many people living here. We also will be talking soon as we go back to our standards document to make sure we're covering everything today. We know that the Deep River harbors help with farming Charleston, where they could transport things. You tended to have more people. People also want to live by water because you do need something to drink and water to power your equipment. Jamestown, as you'll hear a little bit more later this week, was founded in 1607. It's a little triangular fort on the James River, named after King James I. Almost fails. We have the starving times. You have to check in on that video later this week. We did talk a little bit about tobacco being a very important crop in Virginia and even North Carolina. And to the south, the environment was better for things like rice and indigo. The interactions with indigenous people is going to vary. You're going to hear a little bit about relations with Jamestown. We heard earlier this semester on the interactions between Sir Walter Raleigh and the Croatoan people. And there's even the possibility that they're the ones who really kept alive these Europeans, but we don't know what really happened to them, so we can't be sure. We know that in some places the relations are going to be good, good enough at least. In other areas, they're not good. It depends really on the angle that many of the new colonists are taking. Colonizers that come in trying to push people off land tend to be met with resistance. Can't imagine why. Those who are more partnering, they tend to at least have a little bit longer period of time of positive relations. Although we'll find out as time goes on that many of these relations do begin to sour. We mentioned the House of Burgesses, founded in 1619. That'll be discussed more under Jamestown, the first colonial representative assembly, 1607. And we talked a little bit about slavery coming to South Carolina from Barbados. We know that slaves were imported into Jamestown by 1619. And therefore, we have touched on these things. So when you go to do your response, make sure that you're kind of considering all of this. So if you're asked to do a response, an oral response, you can talk about the Southern colonies. You would make sure that you're talking about each one of these things. I may advise that if you're doing this lesson, you might want to wait till after Wednesday to submit it when we cover Jamestown, or at least look at the materials there. So I look forward to seeing the creativity if you do the Flipgrid, or you may complete the Google form or the paper copy of the above document. And let's scroll back. Make sure you're mentioning the reasons they were founded, the influence of geography, economic activities, reasons people left the other areas, and the reasons people came to this area. All of those have been mentioned. If you do this paper, please make sure it's returned at our next paper exchange. If you have any questions about this content, please reach out to me at mireland@psychchipschool.net or visit us during office hours. Bama P.